Snow White and Rapunzel might be worlds apart, but they do have something in common. They are both raised by evil and deceptive stepmothers. If there's one theory we can't shake, it's the one that ties Mother Gothel and Queen Grimhilde together. Watch until the end to find out if these two witches belong to the same twisted soul. New around here? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a big thumbs up. Now let's find out if Mother Gothel and Queen Grimhilde are one in the same.
Stop taking everything so seriously.
Two peas in a pod. Before we get started, let's get one thing out of the way. Disney animators didn't use the same techniques to create Snow White and Tangled. So, knowing this, it's only normal for these films' characters to look different. However, some similarities tie the two characters together. First of all, both Mother Gothel and Queen Grimhilde have wide green eyes and heavy eyelids. They also have long, thin eyebrows and rosy cheeks. If the color of the evil queen's eyebrows are any indication of her hair color, we'd be led to believe that she and Mother Gothel both have dark brown hair. To top it all off, both evil masterminds also seem to have a similar style. Despite the many centuries that occurred during the two movies, both villains are wearing floor-length dresses with full sleeves, along with a red sash tied around their waists. But perhaps the most convincing similarity of all is that Mother Gothel seemed to be transforming into the old version of the evil queen after Rapunzel's hair was chopped off. Are we the only ones who notice this, or does this tidbit ring true in your gut as well? Both their names mean mother. If there's one thing most Disney princesses have in common, it's an evil stepmother. However, when it comes to Snow White and Rapunzel, some might say that their stepmothers are the worst of all. Sure, Cinderella's stepmom wasn't exactly an angel, but she never tried to murder her stepdaughter or physically harm her in any way. Lady Tremaine had her shortcomings, but she had two daughters of her own who she truly cared about, proving that she was capable of loving. When you put Mother Gothel and Queen Grimhilde under the scope, you'll see that they never had any true-born children of their own, but somehow their names translate to mother. According to a German dictionary, Gothel is a dialect for the word godmother, and when taking a look at the meaning behind the name Grimhilde, we find that it translates to Mother of Gudrun. If there's one thing that confuses us, it's that both these characters felt the need to give themselves a motherly name when they couldn't care less about motherhood. Could it be that they chose fake names to trick the public into thinking they were good people? That's for Disney to know and for us to find out.
In a disguise so complete, no one will ever suspect.
The evil queen fell off a cliff. All the evil queen ever wanted was to be the most beautiful woman who ever lived. Now, is that really too much to ask for? Instead of realizing that real beauty is found within, Queen Grimhilde focused all of her energy on her appearance, and by the end of Snow White, it was hard to believe that she had ever been anything but ugly. After scheming to end Snow White's life, the evil queen found herself at a loss. Instead of hiring others to fulfill her task, she decided to poison her stepdaughter herself. This proved to be a bad idea, as she placed herself in the same spot as the 7 dwarves, and they intended on capturing her and bringing her to justice. After chasing the old woman through the forest, they found themselves seconds away from being crushed by a large boulder, but thankfully Mother Nature had something else in mind. Lightning struck at her feet, causing her to fall backward off a cliff, and unfortunately for her, the giant boulder followed suit. While we never saw the evil queen perish, her death is insinuated, but still, if there's one thing movies have taught us, it's that a death isn't justified unless you see the body. So with this in mind, Disney fans have concluded that it's impossible to confirm her passing, which only adds fuel to the theory that Queen Grimhilde and Mother Gothel are one in the same. They both have the same dagger. Every villain has their weapon of choice, and since Disney isn't one to lack imagination, these weapons tend to be very different from one another. In Snow White, Queen Grimhilde hires a huntsman to carve out her stepdaughter's heart. She hands him a dagger in a box and instructs him to place the young princess's heart inside of it before bringing it back to her. After chasing Snow White into the forest, the huntsman is smitten by her beauty and decides to quit while he's ahead. However, returning with an empty box would put his life at stake, so as any sensible huntsman would do, he places a pig's heart inside of the box instead. The shiny, long, and terrifying dagger is handed back to the evil queen, and we don't see it resurface for many decades. Since it's common for Disney villains to have weapons of their own, most of us didn't think twice about Mother Gothel's dagger. However, once tipped off, it became clear that the daggers bore a striking resemblance. Mother Gothel uses her dagger to harm Eugene and nearly succeeds in ending his life. Luckily for him, Rapunzel's tears were just as powerful as her long golden locks. Both stories take place in Germany. Disney movies take place in a magical land that we do not have access to. However, Walt Disney isn't the one who came up with his movies' plots. Instead, Walt Disney Productions drew inspiration through the Brothers Grimm folktales, most of which were too dark and terrible to recite to children. To bring these stories to life, Disney revamped the old tales, making them more kid-friendly. However, some horrors were too juicy to omit. When taking a deeper look at the Snow White and Rapunzel fairy tales, we notice something strange. Both these fables take place in Germany. This information added fuel to the Mother Gothel, Queen Grimhilde conspiracy, making it even more believable. Although Disney's version of Rapunzel's story takes place in the make-believe kingdom of Corona, we can't deny that its roots are firmly planted in Germany. So knowing this, it's totally possible that the evil queen escaped her death and kept a low profile until she was strong enough to pounce anew. If you're having a hard time believing that this theory is correct, watch until the end and be rewarded with the biggest Easter egg of all, and trust us when we say that'll appease every ounce of your skepticism. The time gap. We know what you're thinking. How can Mother Gothel be Queen Grimhilde when their stories take place over 300 years apart? Well, you're not wrong, but that doesn't mean that the theory will get debunked so easily. So while it's true that Snow White took place in the late 1500s and that Rapunzel wasn't born until the early 1800s, there's still a possibility that the evil queen managed to cheat death for centuries at a time. As many of you know, Queen Grimhilde wasn't exactly the youngest girl on the block. In fact, some people believe that she was already an old and wicked woman by the time she married Snow White's father, and as we clearly saw in Tangled, Mother Gothel was as old as a pile of dust. In fact, as soon as the flower's powers were destroyed, the evil stepmother began transforming into an ancient entity. Her transformation was so monstrous that her skin started to flake away until it was nothing more than ashes. This scene proves that Mother Gothel wasn't an old woman, but an ancient one who most probably lived for hundreds of years.
Oh, I bet my surprise is bigger!
Different movie, same actors. While there are some notable differences between the Tangled and Snow White plots, both these stories are filled with similar characters. Snow White grew up with her darling father. However, their happiness ran dry once he married Queen Grimhilde. Forced to continue without him, Snow White was placed under her stepmother's care, which proved to be dangerously toxic. On the other hand, Rapunzel was kidnapped at birth and made to share a roof with a manipulative and skilled liar. Despite their different storylines, one thing remains the same. Two innocent girls are traveling through a forest in an attempt to gain their freedom, and of course their mothers are doing everything in their power to hide them from the world. While Queen Grimhilde wants to murder her stepdaughter to become the fairest of them all, Mother Gothel tends to use Rapunzel to remain the most beautiful version of herself. Both these movies are tailored around beauty and captivity, which ties their villains together with ease. While Snow White stumbles upon a small house filled with dwarves, Rapunzel comes upon a tavern filled with sketchy men. But alas, both protagonists put their prejudice aside and befriend the unexpected.
That's a lot of hair.
Death by falling. Despite being adored by children, Disney movies are based on very mature themes. Since making them 100% PG is impossible, some intense scenes made it all the way to the drawing board and beyond. At the end of Snow White, the evil queen is chased to the top of a mountain, where she soon plummets to her death, or so we're led to believe. Oddly enough, Mother Gothel suffers the same fate when she tumbles out of the tower window. Unlike Queen Grimhilde, though, we clearly see Mother Gothel dissolve in a cloud of smoke as her body hits the ground. So is it a coincidence that both these evil stepmothers perished the exact same way? Or could it be that history is repeating itself to get rid of an ancient entity who's been preying on young women for far too long? Perhaps one of the biggest clues tying these two villains together is the way their bodies begin to age as they near their end. When Mother Gothel's spell is broken, she begins to revert to her old self. which is basically identical to the old woman Queen Grimhilde transforms into in Snow White. It's almost as if Disney creators wanted us to make the connection between these two conniving women. Powers and abilities. Both Queen Grimhilde and Mother Gothel are obsessed with being young and beautiful. However, their need for beauty ends up costing them a lot more than they can afford. As many of you know, the evil queen has many magical skills, and she's not afraid to use them so long as she gets what she wants. She uses dark magic, spells, and alchemy whenever she needs an upper hand, and 9 times out of 10, her victims are no match for her. The evil queen is highly intelligent and manipulative. So does this remind you of anyone? While Mother Gothel doesn't have access to potions and spellbooks, this could be because she was unable to retrieve her stash from Snow White's castle after falling off the cliff. So instead, she harvested magical flowers to achieve a state of youth. Funny enough, both Gothel and Grimhilde are nicknamed the Witch, even though Gothel is hardly ever seen doing spells. Thankfully, these wretched villains are no match for Disney's pure-hearted heroines.
To shroud my clothes, the black of night.
The red apple. So we promised to put your skepticism to rest, and we're ready to deliver the final piece of the puzzle. At first, Eugene couldn't have cared less about Rapunzel, but soon he realized that she was the only person he could truly be himself with. So knowing this, you can imagine how distraught the fugitive was when he realized that Rapunzel had been kidnapped and brought back to her isolated tower. Without skipping a beat, Eugene retraced his steps and found Rapunzel's home once more, determined to rescue the princess from the evil woman who claimed to be her mother. Eugene's heroic moment was short-lived, however, as Mother Gothel's dagger soon pierced him. So what makes us believe that Mother Gothel is indeed Queen Grimhilde? The fact that Gothel's stab wound left the imprint of an apple on the wall directly above Eugene's head. This little Easter egg confirms our suspicions, proving that Rapunzel's captor is in fact the putrid evil queen from Snow White. After all, the poison apple is her most prominent trademark. So have we convinced you that these two villains are the same person? Let us know your verdict in the comments below. And that's it for our video. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on The Things.